And the more I do this, the more I'm trying to embrace things that are not typical. So sometimes I'll have people like really, like, I want you really to bring, I'll pose them like, I don't want to see your hands necessarily, but I want you to be really sort of uncomfortable. Sometimes I feel like if you give them a sort of uncomfortable way to be with their body, it can just make for a very interesting portrait that tells a story. And again, all of this, I should say, is based on the needs of the client as well as my artistic approach. Because if I have a guy, like I had a guy a couple of weeks ago who is sort of a tech CEO kind of guy, and he does not want to look closed off and uncomfortable. So we don't want that for someone like that. However, if I have an artist or a musician or an actor or someone who's just going for a variety of different sorts of looks and different sorts of emotions, I'll do stuff like that too. And then I have Lindsay Adler's posing book is awesome because you have so much in there that you can glean and you can go back to and use it. So I'll use some of those as a reference guide as well.
That's an interesting thing I did the other day, where I thought, it'd be interesting to have a conversation with the subject and basically just shoot them whilst you're having a conversation.
Yeah.
And I basically thought, well, I want them to not necessarily directly look at the camera. So, I moved away. I probably moved about 2 foot or something, 2 feet away from the camera, and then completely relied at eye detection for this one. And I have to say, I was stunned. There was not one shot in that was out of focus. It was unbelievable. But the advantage was that you get a lot of these in-between poses. When somebody's just talking, having a conversation, and they're literally looking over there to where you are, you get a lot of these poses that are completely, that you just couldn't pose. You just couldn't, put somebody willingly into that position because they're just mid-flow or mid speak basically.
Right.
And the hero shot out of that it's just really a phenomenal shot, which is kind of a little bit, the eyes are slightly off camera. There's just, you can tell that there was something moving. You can actually tell it's sort of almost like an action shot in that respect. And yet we're just talking about the face. So these are like micro expressions in the face.
Right.
But it's so much more of an interesting portrait than anything I could have sort of willingly posed. Yeah. So, it's just an interesting thing. And really all it was a conversation. But listening to you talk about continuous light, I now think, well, this would have been even better, I think, with continuous light, because then you wouldn't be aware of the fact, or the subject wouldn't be aware of the fact that you're taking pictures, because you can't tell.
Mm-hmm.
With flashes, of course, the flashes are firing, so you always know. Maybe I should try that. Yeah. See, this is what I love about talking to people on this show. Virtually every time, there's something that makes me think, oh, maybe I should try that. That's really cool.
One of my professors back in college, who, have you seen the movie Whiplash? Which is, it's really it's a big exaggeration of how jazz professors are, although some of them are sort of like on that spectrum of horror. And this guy was kind of one of those, but he would always say, there is no there. And this is to circle back to what we talked about learning music and the way that you, as a musician, you understand early on 2 things. One, I have to work my butt off to be good at this. Like, there's no shortcut. There isn't a shortcut. It's going to take a ton of time and a ton of dedication. And 2, there is no there. In other words, you're never going to wake up one day and you're going to be like, oh, I made it. I'm the best photographer.
Yeah, right? That's it. I've done it now.
Like, exactly. Yeah. So, and the best photographers out there, if you talk to them, the first thing they'll tell you is how much they have to learn. I went to see Christian McBride at, I think it was at the Jazz Standard years ago when that was still a thing. And after the show, and Christian McBride is like one of the best jazz and everything bass players. He plays every style. He's an amazing bass player. just like ungodly amazing. Like it's just, you can't even imagine how this guy plays, right? So I went up to him after the show and I was like, I really enjoyed your playing. Thank you so much. And he's like, oh, I got to work on my bowed bass solos. That's what he said to me. And so it was just a reminder to me that the only way you become one of those people who are the best is by always working at your craft and knowing that there's always something to learn. And the people who don't have that just never get good. You're just not going to get good at it. Like if you think you're good and you think you're great at it, you're never going to feel the need to practice and get better. So I think the healthy way for us as artists and photographers and whatever kind of art we're into is to be sort of know you're great at it and also know you suck at it at the same time. So it's kind of like this pendulum that goes back and forth, and we're somewhere in that spectrum of viewing ourselves. And because you don't also want to be depressed all the time and be like, I suck at this, because that's not fun for anyone. And if you do grow, and when you start to grow and make these inroads and your work is getting better, you definitely want to celebrate those wins, and you want to have confidence and know you're good at it. But you always want to remain having that, what I call a teachable spirit, because if you don't have that, you're gonna get to a certain level and then you'll never learn. And so I do a lot of coaching as well of other photographers, and sometimes people will call me or do a consult with me or want to learn from me. And within 20 seconds of talking to people, sometimes they don't actually want to learn something, because if you do critique their work or tell them, well, maybe you should this, that, or the other thing. Oh, well, I did that because of this, or oh, well, but the reason why I did it like that is because, like, they just make excuses, and it just doesn't even go, like, they just don't want to learn. So if that's for me, that's the worst place to be. I rather be not that good, but have that teachable way about me, because then I know I will get better. But that's sort of how I look at it in a nutshell, as far as what we do, as far as growth is concerned. Because if you're not growing in your craft and in your art, like you're shrinking. It's just like your business. If your business isn't growing, that's a bad thing. It's not good.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where we sort of come back to something you mentioned early on in the conversation, which is test shoots. It's a perfect way to to work on your craft and try out things. And it's almost like non-destructive editing. You can do a test shoot, and if it doesn't work out, well, nobody died. It's all good.
Right.
And
That's where I've learned the most personally, is in test
absolutely.
shoots.
Yeah.
I've learned the most. But what I do is I call it a strategic test shoot, because you just don't want to invite any old person in there. Like, you can, but what I started when I was early on in my career building my studio, I just knew the people I wanted to work with. And so once I had photographed all my family and friends, because that's where we all start, like, you just make them go in front of your camera. And I started to want to photograph other people. And I felt like, okay, I'm decent enough at this that I can do something good. Then I started to reach out to musicians who I wanted to connect with, because they had a great look, number one. Number two, they were in the network of other musicians that I wanted to work with. And number three, they had a big social presence. So I think when we do test shoots, we should be strategic. Like, if you want to work with a certain kind of client, then you want to do a test shoot with someone who's in that industry or in that world or in that space, because then you're going to connect with that. And then I always have guidelines for my test shoots. So it's always, X number of images included, and then you can purchase extras if you want, because you want them to remember, like, this is a value thing. Like, you're getting something of value from me. It benefits both of us. And then I always tell them, and then, you write me a Google review, share them on socials, all that kind of stuff. But some of my best paying clients have come from doing a test shoot with someone in the same space. And not only that, but everything I've learned in all the test shoots, I've brought into my paying clients. So I think it's a win-win if you do it strategically.
Absolutely. Test shoots are so super important. I mean, even, I do test shoots still with, like, a rubber head,
Oh.
just to figure out certain things, or to experiment with different things. And I try out some idea, so this is like, I think, like most creative people, you you think about your creative pursuit at all times, not only when you're doing it. You know, it might
Yes.
just be you're under the shower or you're walking the dog or whatever, and you go, oh, I wonder what happened if I did this. And then,
Yeah.
of course, you got to try it out. You know, just like as a musician, and you're I don't know, you're sitting on a bus and you go like, oh, I've just had this great idea, and you just can't wait to get your hands on a guitar, you know, to try that out. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, then press here for the full episode in glorious Technicolor. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe.